In 1895 CE, Sinister lost control of his condition and developed a split personality with his human self. He returned to his home to continue his experiments. Despite the fact that his conditioning was deteriorating, Sinister was determined to survive to see not only the 20th, but also the 21st century, when machines were expected to become the dominant beings on the planet. He envisioned 4 possible routes that could be explored as a solution to the ascension of artificial intelligence: the mutants, the latent potential of humanity itself, the wonders of space beyond the stars, and magic beyond the understanding of the machine mind. Sinister decided that the only way to beat the machine brains was to create the Apex AI first. He created 4 separate clones marked with different playing card suits. The clone of Diamonds operated as a second Mr. Sinister, further pursuing his knowledge of mutant genetics. The clone of Clubs was located in New York City and was ingrained with a distaste for mutants, choosing to pursue science instead and operating as Dr. Stasis. The clone of Spades ventured into the stars, becoming a galactic arms dealer specializing in xenogenetics known as Orbis Stellaris. The 4th clone, however, was not of Nathaniel, but of his late wife, Rebecca. The clone of Hearts, she became a mystic trader deeply connected to the astral plane, dealing in spells, dreams, and gods as Mother Righteous. The 4 of them raced to become a Dominion, the highest possible rank of interstellar intelligence, existing outside spacetime and possessing godlike powers that couldn't be quantified. Because Dominions are omnitemporal, they exist at all times, even before they properly come into existence. The 4 clones eventually ascended to Dominionhood in the far future, but became absorbed by a fusion of the 4 called Enigma, which orchestrated its own birth. Back in the linear 19th century, the original Sinister committed murders until it reverted to his human personality, which was found naked on the scene with no memories of the incident. The mutant shapeshifter Raven Darkholme, in the guise of Sherlock Holmes, and her partner, the clairvoyant Irene Adler, investigated the incidents. Raven operated out 221B Baker Street and was friends with author Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote down her adventures in his notes and later adapted them into his famous books. Raven and Irene had Sinister arrested and sent away to the Bethlehem Royal Hospital, where overnight he was murdered by Enigma. That same year, Loki caused Ragnarok too early by killing Balder and ended up tied up to rocks under a snake, which dipped deadly venom onto his eyes. Mephisto rescued Loki and offered him to turn back time and undo the catastrophe in exchange for Loki killing a human using one of Mephisto's soul daggers. Transported to Paris, Loki discovered his target was a young composer who was writing an opera about the King in Yellow. Forgetting his bargain, Loki couldn't resist the allure of Chambers' tale weaving and began sponsoring his efforts until the opera finally opened to great acclaim. Participating in the role of the King in Yellow, Loki stabbed the composer at last, completing his bargain with Mephisto, but also tricking the devil, as by now the composer's soul had been poured into his opera, which would last forever. In 1896 CE, Dracula's stolen diary fell into Bram Stoker's hands. The novel Dracula was published a year later, in 1897 CE. Dracula read the novel and penned a venomous letter accusing Stoker of lying, Harker of an opium addiction, and Van Helsing of being part of a long line of charlatan magicians bearing a grudge against him. For good measure, he cursed the letter, writing that any who found it would be devoured by his children of the night. American journalists Mark Cordier and David Fraser became the first to discover the letter a century later, and did indeed fall victim to the curse. That year, the vampire Margarita freed Dracula by tricking Frankenstein's monster into believing she knew the location of the last living Frankenstein. After being freed, Dracula battled the Frankenstein monster, who aimed to stop his killing spree. After a brief struggle, the monster thrust Dracula into the breaking daylight, weakening him long enough to allow the monster to stake him through the heart, killing Dracula once more. Dracula soon recovered and discovered the existence of the clan Akaba and its relation to Apocalypse, the man who turned him into a vampire by defeating him on the battlefield. Dracula began a vengeful campaign against Clan Akaba, slaughtering many before Van Helsing determined he was involved. While most of Clan Akaba eventually became vampires and were destroyed in the conflict, Apocalypse and Van Helsing managed to gain the upper hand. Dracula was impaled and decapitated by Apocalypse with his own limbs, but the mutant refused to follow Van Helsing's superstitious rituals to permanently destroy the vampire. Dracula soon recovered and in 1899 CE slew Van Helsing. That year, Sherlock participated in the Octessence, a contest between himself and 7 higher beings invoked for power called principalities, to determine which of them was the most powerful. Each being would use a magical artifact to create avatars out of the first human to touch it. Once one human had been transformed, others would be drawn to the remaining artifacts. These humans, called exemplars, would conquer humanity and fight each other to the death until only one was left standing. Whoever's avatar was left standing would be the winner. Chitarak created the Crimson Gem of Chitarak as his artifact and placed it in his temple of Chitarak in what would one day become Korea. Centuries ago, an order of monks attempted to summon Chitarak to Earth, but mistakenly summoned his destructive aspect instead. A pair of rival sorcerers, Gormor and Tar, succeeded in sealing this aspect within the Crimson Gem. A Korean man touched the Crimson Gem and was transformed into the Juggernaut, Chitarak's agent on Earth. He caused chaos, destroying his own village. During his wanderings, Yao discovered the Temple of Chitarak. There, he faced off against and won over the demon Jorak the Outcast, whom he bound to the Crimson Gem of Chitarak. At the end of the 19th century, Jonas Ravencroft founded the Ravencroft Institute for the Criminally Insane. One of the workers building the facility claimed Mephisto told him to cave the foreman's head in with a hammer. The mutant Tobias Messenger was active in the 19th century. In 1900 CE, Rose fell in love with the foreman of the stone quarry in which she lived with Logan. Despite his initial dislike of the idea of Rose marrying someone, Logan eventually agreed to let it happen. When he went to give the couple his blessing, he came upon Dog, who had found their hiding spot and initiated a fight. Rose attempted to stop Logan from killing Dog, and Logan accidentally killed her. Stricken with grief and guilt for the death of his first love, Logan fled into the nearby woods, where he lived in self-imposed exile in a feral state with a pack of wolves for a while. Dog continued to hunt him and his pack of wolves all over Canada in the years that followed, and after killing half of his wolf pack, he finally cornered Logan outside of an old mine along the Yukon River. Thinking Logan was inside, Dog entered the mine in order to kill him once and for all, but in here he discovered several time diamonds from the meteorite that caused the extinction of the dinosaurs, and they teleported him to the future, where he would spend years preparing for his revenge against his half-brother. One day Logan found the place of a Native American massacre and met Death itself. Logan attacked Death and told her to take him too, since he had no one left, but Death left him alone. In the 20th century, Death became angered by Dracula's disruption of the natural order. Taking the form of Carlos Muertos, Death raised a mob against Dracula in Madrid. After several deaths and resurrections, Death finally revealed herself and conceded defeat, calling for a temporary truce. In 1906, during the San Francisco earthquake, the Dreaming Celestial's chamber was damaged. The Eternals arrived and joined their wills and intelligence into the Unimind to fix it. At the time, the Eternal Sprite was affected by the Mad Wari, a madness that affects Eternals due to their extreme longevity. He realized he could use the Dreaming Celestial's powers to change his eternal life, allowing him to finally grow up as he was stuck in the body of a boy. Preparing a 100-year plan, Sprite began meddling with the memories of the other Eternals, and, among other things, made them forget the existence of the activation chamber and of their nature as flesh robots. At an unknown date, 1907 being the earliest possible, the Eternal Gilgamesh learned of his true heritage, and Zuras, leader of the Eternals, confined him to a sector of the Eternal City of Olympia, renaming him the Forgotten One. It was said that Zura's reason for this action was the Forgotten One's pride and his insistence on intervening in human affairs. As of yet, no details of these charges have been revealed. The Forgotten One remained banished to this sector, which the other Eternals shunned for centuries. In 1907, the Nathaniel Essex clone who called himself Mr. Sinister sent a weaponized polar bear near Logan's wolf pack, and the bear wiped out the wolves. Enraged, Logan killed the bear, attracting Sinister's attention. Back in town, rumors started to spread about this incident, which attracted the attention of a circus promoter and his associates, the Creed siblings, Saul, a tracker, and Clara, an animal trainer. Sinister sent his personal army after Logan, the Marauders. Logan defeated the Marauders and then confronted the Creed's own search party, but Clara saw the man within the beast and calmed Logan down. As a result, Logan let his guard down, and Saul captured him. Logan became the new attraction of the circus, where he was tortured on a daily basis. Sinister killed the circus promoter and started to experiment on Logan, testing the limits of his healing factor. Clara convinced Saul to help her, and they rescued Logan. For a month, Clara taught Logan how to act like a man, and they became romantically involved, which made Saul jealous. To get rid of Logan, Saul gave Sinister their location. While fighting Sinister's Marauders, Logan entered a berserker rage and accidentally stabbed Clara. Logan arrived at Sinister's laboratory, where he wounded Sinister and threw him through a window before discovering that Clara had survived thanks to a healing factor of her own. Despite her pleas, Logan drowned Saul to death, and he never saw Clara again. She reported Saul's death to her older brother, Victor, which prompted him to go after Logan to get his revenge. Throughout the next 2 years, Victor searched for Logan and began working as Mr. Sinister's assistant, who had moved his operations to the Ravencroft Institute in Westchester County. James Ravenglass was a descendant of a member of the cult known as the Lords of Darkness, which had divided a power capable of controlling all souls of Earths among their bloodlines. As Mephisto wanted that power, he had sent assassins through the centuries to kill a member of the Ravenglass family, needing only to stab one of them with a soul dagger to obtain their share of the power. James became aware of this struggle when he was but a boy, and his father began training him in the mystic arts, as their Whitehaven mansion possessed a sanctum sanctorum with artifacts from Camartage, originating from Tibetan grandparents. In 1908, a large explosion occurred near the Podkamennaya Tunguska River in Russia, flattening 80 million trees. Many explanations have been given to explain the event. A meteor fell over the region. The alien, later referred to as the Shambler, tried to visit the Earth and crash-landed in Siberia. The explosion was needed to maintain a powerful spell from the group of mystics called the Dry Academy. According to their religion, the world was actually a place of such unimaginable horror that everyone would commit suicide if they saw the truth, and the Academy's spell sustained the happy illusion people called reality. Nikola Tesla was experimenting with ionizing the Earth's atmosphere and realized that his scalar technology could produce giant bolts of lightning around the globe. A test run for his new weapon was responsible for the Tunguska Event. The Deathwalkers, a group of people who had achieved immortality through black magic, gathered to perform a ritual and create Bear, a powerful hybrid between beast and a human. The spell created the explosion, and Bear escaped from her evil masters. When Black Bolt, future king of the Inhumans, attacked Kang the Conqueror with a sonic wave during the Modern Age, Kang caused the sonic wave to travel back in time to Tunguska in 1908. Dr. Doom of the Modern Age arrived here while battling an alternate universe Iron Man through time, causing the explosion. In 1909, Albion Crawley, the greatest occultist of his era, made a serious attempt at the greatest of magical tasks, the crossing of the abyss by using a frozen fire ritual, convinced that an infinite mind power lay on the other side. He persuaded one of his students, Victor Numenon, to join him in the expedition. Eventually, they discovered old sorcerer's tracks named Webway's strands that led them directly towards the abyss. However, in reality, the Webway's strands were an enchantment, the living strands of a vast web of arachnids, spider demons, that devoured souls. Crawley and Numenon walked straight into a tribe of arachnids, who imprisoned Numenon inside a cocoon and feasted on Crawley. He smashed Numenon's cocoon, hoping they would go after him instead, but Numenon came out of it turned into a sacrificial creature, a saurer fly. Crawley cheated the spiders out of their meal and made it home by clinging onto the saurer fly as he flew, but his quest for infinite mind power was a failure. As for the saurer fly, he flew into the insect realms, also known as the insect dimension, and was never heard of again. In 1909, Victor Creed found Logan unconscious in a crime scene and took him to the Ravencroft Institute. Seeing Logan again made Sinister eager to resume his experiments, so he lobotomized Logan and brutalized him while Creed enjoyed the show. One night, one of the doctors helped Logan escape, and she also revealed she was responsible for the murders that Logan was blamed for, as she was a werewolf. Creed and Sinister later experimented on the doctor and killed her. Shortly after, an inmate named Fisk, also known as the Gardener, manipulated Creed and, pushing on the fact that Sinister looked down on Victor, convinced him to quit his job and free Fisk. Under the name Mad Dog Murphy, Victor became an enforcer for Fisk's gang and helped him become kingpin in New York by slaughtering all opposing gangs, such as the Yancey Street Gang, the Sons of Amsterdam, history's first masked villains, and the super gangs, such as the Franken Gang, the Street Sorcerers Supreme, the Shockers, and the Night Flyers. Secretly, these were run by Marmaduke Dix, a county fair runner who was the avatar of Sobek, the Egyptian god rival of Khonshu. Dix could transform into a lizard form, going by the name of Crocodilian. By September, the defeated gangs hired Dragonfire, a K'un-Lun assassin, to take out Creed. However, she only accepted the job because she found him attractive, and they began dating instead. Afterwards, she convinced him to become the Kingpin himself. Sabretooth and Dragonfire ruled the gangs of New York as the kingpins of crime until the Crocodilian killed Dragonfire and Creed was attacked by his old boss, Fisk, who used a Crimson Dynamo armor, a Russian import for the Coney Island Fair. Creed killed Fisk and beat the Crocodilian until he went into hiding, but afterwards he had no heart to continue ruling the gangs. Impressed by his achievements, Sinister met with Creed and they formally made amends, and Creed decided to return his focus to Logan once more. In the turmoil preceding World War I, Lord John Falsworth invaded Dracula's tomb, hoping to turn him into a living weapon. Instead, Dracula vampirized him, sending him back to England to wreak havoc as the first Baron Blood. On his first trip to Japan, Logan encountered members of the ninja sect known as the Hand. The Hand extorted Logan into fighting Sabretooth, who was murdering women in Tokyo under orders of Romulus, the immortal founder of Rome for whom he had started working. Sabretooth turned out to be Logan's old foe, Victor Creed, but before Logan could kill him, their fight was stopped by Romulus, who knocked Logan out. After he awakened, Sabretooth was gone, so Logan decided to head back to Canada. But first, he made a stop in Madripoor. There, apparently under Romulus' guidance, Logan became a mercenary, while here he also met and romanced Seraph, a diminutive woman employed by Romulus, who had instructed her to form such a relationship with Logan. In the next years, Logan would realize that Seraph and others worked under a single authority, but he didn't know or care who it was at the time. At some point later, Logan traveled to another frontier community in the Canadian Rockies and met a young Blackfoot Indian woman named Silver Fox, with whom he fell in love. The two shared a cabin together and lived happily for a time. Logan had made a new life for himself, hunting and farming chores around the homestead. On Logan's birthday, Sabretooth, possibly under Romulus' orders, brutally attacked Silver Fox, raping her and leaving her for dead. The first of many birthday surprises from him to come. Enraged, Logan battled him in a bar, only to be defeated. Sabretooth then manipulated a feral, mindless Logan into believing the people of a nearby town had ordered Silver Fox's death, prompting Logan to slaughter the inhabitants of the town. Later, employed by the Hudson Bay Company as a fur trader to the Blackfoot Indians, Logan defeated the demonic snake worm known as unsigilla, a feat which earned him the Blackfoot warrior name of Skunk Bear or Wolverine. Around 1911, Logan settled in Montana, where he helped locals and was known as the unkillable man from up north. One day, Loki, who was wrestling with feelings of heroism, helped him track down a gang of murderers after relating to Logan's status as an outcast. During moments known as nexus points, clusters of progress and renewed possibilities, agents of change arose. Philosophers, thinkers, politicians, mystics, martyrs, and messiahs, these individuals were harbingers of hope and better times, but they were hunted by the fallen angel Asmodee, who was rebelling against the fact that God created humans to surpass his other creations in their capacity to create peace and know joy. Harriet Tubman, abolitionist and social activist, was one agent of change, and Asmodee orchestrated her death in 1913. Ibn Stafford was part of the Men on the Wall, a group of people with high-technology weapons who protected Earth from alien threats from the shadows and in complete autonomy for decades. In 1913, they earned their stripes by stopping a Martian invasion and later stopped more aliens in Calcutta. When World War I started in 1914 CE, Logan was deployed to Europe. While fighting in Belgium in 1915, Logan encountered a being called Lazaire, the Angel of Death, who was killing soldiers on the battlefield. They fought one another, with Logan besting the angel. This sent Logan into a deep depression, even causing him to put a gun to his own head at one point. Logan started to drink considerably more as the war dragged on and ate less and less, until Lazaire finally confronted him. Lazaire explained that the depression was a punishment for defeating him and defying the natural order of things. As a result of Logan's victory, whenever he became wounded severely enough to tax even his healing factor, he would fight Lazaire in an astral arena, and if he defeated the angel, he would get another shot at life. That year, Ernest Shackleton was sent on a voyage by Winston Churchill to bring back a sample of vibranium from the Antarctic. However, his ship, the Endurance, was lost. Compelled by Dracula to wage war on the UK, Baron Blood allied with the Germans and clashed against his brother, Montgomery Falsworth, the costumed hero Union Jack. Union Jack also served in the wartime group of Allied masked heroes, Freedom's Five, alongside Phantom Eagle, Crimson Cavalier, Sir Steel, and Silver Squire. The Inhuman Triton also helped save lives during the war. Ghost Rider was also incarnated during World War I with an airplane as his vehicle of choice. He fought the creature Verminous Rex on the Western Front. John Steele fought in the war, but he was captured by Germans and his body was kept in stasis at a lab located in Frankfurt as part of Project John Steele, which sought to unlock the secrets of his powers. In 1916, Wolfgang von Strucker encountered the Momentary Princess, which was fated to appear and disappear at regular intervals of time. When he touched it, he saw he would become the leader of the terrorist organization, Hydra. Grigory Rasputin was a Russian mutant with the power to heal others. His fame attracted the attention of Mr. Sinister, who formed a partnership with Rasputin to spread his genetic material with as many women as possible to expedite the appearance of Sinister's predicted Essex men. However, a man was outraged that Rasputin slept with his sister and was disgusted at the mutant's influence, so he met with the Russian Grand Duke and the Prince and painted a narrative of Rasputin having secret dealings with German agents. On December 29, 1916, the conspirators fatally poisoned and shot Rasputin. Wounded, he requested Sinister's help to summon his brides and initiated a mystic ritual, splitting his consciousness among the dormant unborn children nestled within their wombs. Afterwards, his corporeal form succumbed. Sinister decided to curate the Rasputin bloodline over the decades, eliminating most of them to prevent it from watering down and to hasten Rasputin's revival, and sparing only the most potent to serve as the vessel for Rasputin's rebirth. When the Russian Revolution happened in 1917 CE, the Russian royal family, Kravenov, escaped, purchasing Kravenov Estate in New York City. As time passed, the former Grand Duke's despair grew, leading him to disregard his status. He even engaged in a relationship with one of his servants, Sonia, who bore a son named Dmitri. However, the Duke couldn't bear to face him, The only member in his family who barely tolerated him was the legitimate son, Sergei, who was also abusive towards him. In order to impress Sergei, Dmitri entertained him by using his impersonation skills on his neighbors and friends. Dmitri was so deeply scarred that he repressed his very identity and came to believe he was mere friends with Sergei. Eventually, Dmitri was approached by a man named Gustav Fiers. Impressed by the boy's ability to disguise himself, Fiers took him to his brother Karl, also known as the Finisher. Karl took Dmitri under his wing to hone his abilities in a school for the cover arts. Dmitri left the Kravenov estate without saying goodbye to anyone, not even to Sergei. Fiers' academy trained other children to become perfect impersonators and sleeper agents known as chameleons. The most prized pupil of the Finisher, Dmitri, became known as the one and only chameleon. Meanwhile, Sergei grew distant from his homeland, and his mother descended into madness, leaving his father feeling utterly abandoned in a foreign land, resigned to a fate of solitude and eventual demise. In the early 20th century, Orson Randall's parents' airship crashed in Kunlun, causing the boy to be born and raised in the city. Orson completed the trials to become the Iron Fist, but for his final test before facing the dragon Sherlock, he had to defeat Shu Hu, the One. Seduced by Orson's father's tales of the outside world, the UT ordered the One to intentionally lose. But he refused, so he was replaced by a robot. Orson won the fight as expected, and then bested Sherlock, becoming the first Westerner Iron Fist. When Martian masters invaded London in 1917, they were directly opposed by the Freedom's Five, which now included Orson in their ranks. The men on the wall battled the invaders and helped Freedom's Five from the shadows, leaving no trace of themselves. Eventually, the invaders were repelled. Red, green, black, and white Martians formed various civilizations on Mars, originating from the Tree of Life. Their civilizations prospered for a time until devastation struck, and the races began dying, with several cities becoming abandoned. An American Civil War veteran named John Carter was mysteriously transported to Mars, called Barsoom by the locals, where he became a warlord and married the Red Martian princess, Dejah Thoris. He was briefly sent back to Earth before returning to Barsoom, giving him the opportunity to tell his stories to Edgar Rice Burroughs, who wrote these adventures in his books. Logan was in Paris when an armistice was signed in 1918 between the Germans and the Allies, ending World War I. However, he felt in no mood for celebration, as he'd come to understand German soldiers were as human as him or any ally. In 1920, Leonard Mackenzie, with the telepath Paul Destiny as a passenger, attempted to recover vibranium lost in the Antarctic in a 1915 expedition by the ship Endurance. Fenn of Atlantis was sent to investigate the charges to blast through the ice by her father, Thakor. Mackenzie met, fell in love with, and impregnated Princess Fenn. However, Atlantean soldiers came to retrieve Fenn and attacked Mackenzie's crew. Leonard Mackenzie was believed dead by Fenn following the attack, and she returned to Atlantis, pregnant. The child was named Namor, which meant avenging son. In 1921, Logan was arrested in the Mexican Sondrin Desert under charges of horse thievery. He was blindfolded and tied to a post to be shot by a firing squad next to Raven Darkholme, the shapeshifter who once was Sherlock Holmes, under charges of witchcraft because of her mutant blue skin. Logan managed to survive and kill the guards. After they both escaped, Raven and Logan became friends, and she introduced him to her gang of robbers in Kansas City. When Logan expressed his reluctance to get attached to people, Raven manipulated him. They kissed, and Logan decided to help her. However, Raven betrayed Logan and her friends by alerting the police, leaving her crew to take the fall for the heist while she escaped with the stolen money. Filled with hatred, Logan continued his own criminal activities for a few years, smuggling bootleg alcohol during Prohibition in the mid-1920s. In 1921, Sergei Kravenov crossed paths in New York with Aja Orisha, a Wakandan who had been exiled from her homeland. United by their shared experiences as exiles, they formed a deep bond. Together, they raised her child, Takar. Aja took Kraven with her back to Africa, where she imparted upon him the teachings of Wakanda and instilled in him a passion for the hunt, thus earning him the moniker Kraven the Hunter. Despite her affection for him, Aja recognized the darkness within Kraven. Upon their return to New York, she subjected him to the rigorous Yan San on ritual, involving the Calypso serum. Tragically, Sergei succumbed to the ritual's effects. Although he was meant to remain in a state of darkness for 2 weeks, he unexpectedly revived after just 4 days. The ritual, instead of quelling his darkness, exacerbated it, leading Kraven to blame Aja for his torment. Consumed by his newfound darkness, he departed for Africa alongside his adopted son Takar, renaming him Gregor. In 1922, inspired by the slaughter of millions of people during World War I, Wolfgang Fortunov decided that the world was not fit to rule itself. He assembled a cabal of powerful men and women to pull the strings of government and people in secret, ensuring a measure of peace and stability called the Outer Circle. This included himself as power, Ika Agboje as the machine, Etienne Argent as money, and Anna as love. To ensure that what they called the century's game was fair, Fortunov included in the group Gavrilo Princip, the man who assassinated Franz Ferdinand, saving him from execution, to take the role of the revolution, whose purpose was to bring the outer circle down from the inside. In 1922, Steve Rogers was born on September 28th in New York City to poor Irish immigrant parents, Sarah and Joseph Rogers. In 1925, James Buchanan Bucky Barnes Jr. was born to Winifred and James Barnes Sr. Around 100 years ago, Galactus planned to feed on the world of Zenla, a worldwide utopia devoid of crime, disease, hunger, poverty, and want of any kind. The man responsible for these achievements was revered scientist Norrin Khan, but his wife Elmar killed herself when she failed to adapt to the new environment. Their son, Norrin Rad, longed for a challenge and wished he could live in his planet's adventurous past. When Galactus appeared over the planet, Norrin offered to become his herald and seek out new worlds for him to sate his hunger in exchange for Galactus sparing Zenla. Galactus agreed, transforming Norrin into a silver-skinned, cosmic-powered super being, patterned after an adolescent fantasy plucked from Norrin's memories. Known thereafter as the Silver Surfer because of the silvery flying board he rode, Rad departed Zenla with Galactus, leaving his lover, Shalabal, behind. At first, the Surfer tried to find energy-rich worlds devoid of sentient life for his master, but this became increasingly difficult. The destruction of the first inhabited planet he offered to Galactus almost drove Norrin insane, forcing Galactus to alter the mind of his herald, submerging Rad's emotions and repressing past memories. As a result, the Surfer became much more willing to lead Galactus to inhabited worlds. At some point, the Silver Surfer encountered the symbiote planet Clintar and was attacked by its inhabitants, which attempted to imprison him at its core. But he managed to break free and escape. At some point after this, he sacrificed Jute, one of the worlds conquered by the symbiote hive, to Galactus, further exacerbating the symbiote's instinctual hatred for him. After 19 years training in the mystic arts, James Ravenglass founded the Hermetic Order of the Peacock Quill as a means to amass enough power to summon Dormammu and strike a bargain with him wherein he would protect his family from Mephisto's constant assassination attempts. Uninterested, Dormammu merely toyed with Ravenglass, torturing in his dark dimension until Mephisto's servant, Sister Sorrow, killed James and stole his soul for her master. A student in the 1920s, Herbert Wyndham was inspired by the work of Nathaniel Essex to perform his own genetic experiments involving rats in his parents' basement. Later, when he attended a conference in Geneva, Wyndham was approached by a disguised inhuman named Fader, who gave Wyndham the secrets for unlocking genetic codes. As a result, he created a serum that allowed for genetic alteration, but his controversial work got him expelled from Oxford University. However, Wyndham joined with another fellow scientist, Jonathan Drew, to continue his work. Wundagore Mountain was the state of Gregory Russoff, a Transylvanian baron whose ancestor had battled Dracula, and, while rescuing a woman from Dracula's castle, she had turned out to be a werewolf and bit him, inflicting the Russoff bloodline with lycanthropy. Gregory sold a portion of his estate, including the Wundagore Mountain itself, to Wyndham and his partner. In 1928, Drew and Wyndham uncovered a substantial uranium deposit on the mountain, using its wealth to create an advanced research facility, the Citadel of Science, built by a workforce of Moloids granted by Feder. Drew's daughter Jessica became ill thanks to their proximity to the mountain's reserves of uranium, Jonathan, being an expert on the regenerative and immunological properties of arachnids' blood, injected Jessica with an untested serum made with the blood of several uncommon species of spiders in the hopes of stopping the tissue damage and immunizing the girl from the uranium radiation in her blood. She was treated with Wyndham's evolutionary technology and placed in suspended animation. Later, Drew's wife was killed by a werewolf, Gregory's father Gregor. While Wyndham survived the attack, Jonathan left Wundagore, and Wyndham constructed a suit of advanced armor to protect himself, calling himself the High Evolutionary. In 1929, Professor Phineas Horton became employed by Victor Timely Jr. of Timely Industries, who in reality was Kang the Conqueror. There, Horton used Kang's futuristic technology to create a solar gem which he would utilize to develop synthetic humans for the next 10 years, as well as the Horton cell, the basic building block of artificial life. That year, Logan worked as a bootlegger for Bugs Moran and made a new girlfriend named Molly Barker. Al Capone began encroaching on Moran's business, and Victor Creed convinced the mobster to hire him as a hitman and use him to kill Logan's girlfriend. Afterwards, Creed left a trail so that Logan would be able to find him, leading him to getting shot alongside 7 other thugs in what was known as the Valentine's Day Massacre. When Logan healed from the gunshots, Creed told him that everything had been a lesson on how Al Capone might get the recognition. But it was mutants who ran things from the shadows, and they should form a group or brotherhood and take over. Logan disagreed, but was too weak to stop Creed from leaving. Lucas Cross, a member of the secret society, the Order of Tirana, sent his pregnant wife, Tara, to England before he was taken prisoner in Latveria. There, she took the name Vanessa Brooks and found shelter with brothel owner Madame Vanity, another member of the Order of Tirana. On the 24th October 1929, experiencing labor complications, Tara was forced to seek a doctor's assistance. The doctor, Deacon Frost, was actually a ravenous vampire and feasted on the woman as she gave birth, passing on a series of enzymes that altered her baby, Eric. The enzymes entered the infant's bloodstream, transforming him into a being tainted by a vampire's kiss, but not converted, called a dhampir. Frost was driven away before he could slay the child, but Tara perished, leaving the orphaned Eric Brooks to be raised at Madame Vanity's brothel. The Black Rider retired as a vigilante and lived until at least the 1930s. One day he found a thief named Dennis Piper breaking into his house. Finding out Dennis stole from the wealthy to give to those affected by the Great Depression, he recognized Dennis as someone that would fight against the powerful on behalf of the downtrodden and gave him his mask, the Eternity Mask, which he now understood was a magic mask that made the wearer the equal of their opponent. He then warned Piper not to give it back to the Scientists' Guild, the current incarnation of the guild who originally created the mask during the times of King Arthur. With the mask, Dennis reinvented himself as the operative. He eventually changed careers and became a private detective crime writer under the assumed name Leslie Lenroe. His detective work earned him the nickname Ferret for his ability to ferret out criminals. Stephen Vincent Strange was born in November of 1930 CE to Eugene and Beverly Strange while the couple were vacationing in Philadelphia. Stephen grew up at the family home in Nebraska. In 1931, Logan was in South Africa where he met a herd of elephants and befriended one of the youngest, named Lol. Not long after, the herd was found by Kraven the Hunter and his new wife, Alexandra. The two started to shoot the elephants, but Logan was able to stop them and made them run away. Unfortunately, Lol's mother and sister were killed in the process, and the herd decided to move away. That year, all the men on the wall except Stafford fell to the intergalactic slavers, Antari. This caused Stafford to act more proactively against potential alien threats, like traveling to space to deal with them there, working as the last man on the wall. During one of the Antari trips to Earth to collect slaves, Stafford found them battling a group of Native Americans and the young Woodrow McCord Jr., whose family had been taken by the Antari. After killing the aliens, he took McCord to work with him in his mountain base in the Rocky Mountains. By 1932, Logan was in Madripoor again, and Seraph taught him how to be a better assassin. Around this time, Logan started to use his recurrent alias, Patch. The Hand attempted to gain a foothold in Madripoor, but were opposed by Seraph and Logan. That year, Theodore Roosevelt won the United States presidential election, an event influenced by the Illuminati Outer Circle. The High Evolutionary started genetically enhancing domestic and wild animals into the new men, such as Bova, a female bovine, Porga, a humanoid pig, and Tagar, a bipedal tiger, aided by a new assistant named Miles Warren. The spirit of 6th century magician Magnus possessed the High Evolutionary's old partner Jonathan Drew, who returned to Wundagore to warn the High Evolutionary that the mountain was the banishing place of the demon Chthon. Though the scientifically minded High Evolutionary scoffed at this, Magnus convinced the High Evolutionary to teach the new men a chivalry code like that of his medieval era. Magnus wanted to train them into a disciplined military force, whereas Wyndham simply accepted to teach the uncultured creatures manners. Either way, they formed the Knights of Wundagore. One of the new men was the Inheritor, an evolved cockroach who developed megalomania, and unlike his peers, refused to follow Wyndham's orders and chivalry code. Wyndham reacted by banishing him to outer space. In 1933 CE, Ulysses Bloodstone teamed up with Fat Cobra, an immortal weapon from one of the legendary 7 capital cities of heaven, and the two went on adventures across the globe. They sailed to the Savage Land and Monster Isle and fought Moloids, living mummies, and Yetis. This led Bloodstone into a rematch with Fin Fang Foom, which he won. That same year, Logan resumed his smuggling activities and was carrying whiskey down from Canada with an old World War I friend named Elias. One day, the duo was confronted by rival bootleggers in Minnesota, and Elias was killed during the attack. To honor his friend's memory, Logan decided to fulfill his final request and get Elias' children to safety at their aunt's farm in South Dakota. Logan was successful in his mission, and as a reward, he was gifted a motorcycle. In 1933, Orson Randall, the Iron Fist, was summoned back to Kunlun to participate in the Tournament of Heaven, but refused to participate, having been changed by his experiences in the war, which made him become a drug addict. When confronted by the immortal weapons, Randall killed the Crane champion of Kunzi in self-defense and fled, taking a book with the history of the Iron Fists with him. While in hiding, Randall met a young orphan named Wendell Rand and adopted him as his ward, training him in martial arts while filling his head with stories of Kunlun and the Iron Fist, causing Wendell to seek the city out himself once he came of age. The Dalai Lama was an agent of change who arose during a nexus point, a cluster of progress and renewed possibilities, and could have brought forth an age of positive improvement if not for the fallen angel Asmodee orchestrating his death in 1933. German boy Johann Schmidt worked for the crime lord Emil Beckert until he told Johann to murder his friend Dieter, as his communist tendencies could put him in danger. Johann responded by attempting to kill his boss, but the attempt was interrupted by the burning of the Reichstag government building, an act that led to a state of emergency and completed the Nazis' rise to power. Dieter was captured and taken to a concentration camp, while Johann became a member of the Nazi Brown Shirts. Although he had aspirations to become a part of the SS, His superiors kept disciplining him, beating him, and abusing him. When Dieter was let go of the concentration camp, Johann suggested they work together to kill Adolf Hitler. In 1934 CE, the boys dressed up as bellhops and entered Hitler's hotel room to deliver food to him. However, when Dieter pulled the gun and attempted to shoot Hitler, Johann, recalling his beliefs that the strong must survive in a harsh world, shot his only friend in the head, killing him. The Gestapo agents rushed Johann, but before they could kill him, Hitler stopped them. Impressed by the boy, Hitler invited him to become his right-hand man, molding the boy in his own image. Trying to carry out Hitler's orders, his subordinates at first attempted to train Schmidt to become a perfect German soldier, wearing an ordinary SS uniform. Hitler wanted to turn Schmidt into something quite different, so he personally took over his training. Early in his tutelage under Hitler, Schmidt was brought to the castle of Baron Helmut Zemo to witness tests on his prototype Death Ray. Also in attendance was scientist Abraham Erskine, who was working on Project Nietzsche to create super soldiers. Both Hitler and the Schmidt mocked Erskine for his ideals about using science to improve human bodies when Aryans were already perfect and could prove their superiority by raping the earth with death rays instead. Logan was hired by a cabal known as the Covenant, which included Ulysses Bloodstone to kill the Dreaming Maiden, a woman whose dreams were attracting a celestial to Earth and risked global destruction. Logan couldn't do it and decided to hide her somewhere safe in a cave. To make sure she couldn't be found, he asked her to stop using her powers until he found a way to save her. As a result, she stopped dreaming and turned to crystal. In 1935 CE, Logan reported back to the Covenant that the Dreaming Maiden was dead. Despite the fact that the Covenant wanted Logan to kill more people like her, he refused and walked away. On September 15th, the Nazis established the Nuremberg Laws, causing Jewish families such as the Eisenhardts to be persecuted. Even though Erich Eisenhardt was beaten and forced to wear a sign saying that he had shamed a German woman, Erich's brother, Jacob, refused to leave their home, unable to believe their country would betray them like that after being a World War I veteran. He went to Major Scharf, hoping to get immunity, but he only got hours of beatings instead. As things worsened in Germany, Jacob was forced to accept reality and brought the family, including his son Max, to Warsaw, Poland. Somewhere in the 30s, Logan began working at a circus which moonlighted as bank robbers, as an attraction named the Amazing Immortal Man. When a woman from the circus was about to have her baby, Logan requested that they postpone their next robbery so she could go to the city's doctor, but the leader refused, robbed the bank, and left the woman with nothing but a midwife, causing her to die giving birth. Logan went berserk with rage and burned the circus down, then disappeared after the robbery was pinned on him. In 1936 CE, Logan was in Scotland working with Raven Darkholme and Irene Adler. Logan was unaware that the apparently male Raven was the woman who had betrayed him years prior. They met a time-traveling young girl named Kitty Pryde who was stranded in the past. Kitty wanted to go to Germany to stop Hitler and the Nazis before they could start World War II and kill millions of Jews during the Holocaust. Irene warned Kitty about the consequences of altering history, saying killing Hitler might create a chaotic situation that they couldn't predict. Kitty persisted, and although she didn't reach Hitler, Logan helped her stop a plot to dispute the lineage of England's royal family and install a new king who wouldn't oppose Germany in the coming war, attempted by Nazis Nicholas Geist, Wolfgang von Strucker, and the Shadow King, a multiversal manifestation of the dark side of human consciousness, spawned by the first nightmare. In 1937 CE, Bloodstone and Fat Cobra teamed up with the Canadian hero Puck to fight against an alien race named Plodex. They were able to detonate dynamite to destroy it. That year, Logan and Puck assisted in the Spanish Civil War, battling alongside writer Ernest Hemingway. At age 17, Namor had his first clash against the Nazis while enjoying some time to fly. Attacked by a Nazi fighter plane who was sent to bomb the area, Namor, confusing the plane with a bird, destroyed the ship. However, the resulting blast knocked him out. Reviving back in Atlantis, his mother explained what the plane was, and that they had salvaged its wing so that they could keep it as a trophy of Namor's first triumphant battle. Criminologist and man of fortune Dominic Fortune was hired to investigate the murder of Andrea McLean. Andrea worked for Howard Stark, using her connections in the precious metals business to negotiate contracts to obtain vibranium from Wakanda between Britain, Germany, and Latveria. Dominic stole Stark's files on Andrea and visited Germany, where he interviewed Baron Zemo and Baron Strucker and met Hitler's right-hand man, Johann Schmidt. In Latveria, Dominic interviewed another broker for the vibranium and learned that Germany kept the Nazi influence away from Latveria in exchange for their technology and knowledge of the mystical arts. Shortly afterward, Dominic was chased by Latverian agents, but he was rescued by two gypsies who were ancestors of Victor Von Doom. After being rescued, Dominic headed to Wakanda, where he met Black Panther Azuri and his father, King Metelli, who were heartbroken to hear of Andrea's passing. Ultimately, Dominic determined Andrea was double-dealing to the Nazis behind Stark's back, and she had been killed by her partner. Later that year, Dominic met von Strucker again in America when he stopped him from assassinating Senator Fulton, an enemy of the Reich. However, Strucker escaped. After much training, Hitler gave Schmidt a lifelike Red Skull-like head mask and named him the Red Skull. The skull was answerable only to Hitler himself. While growing up on the streets of London, Eric Brooks ran into American veteran vampire slayer Jamal Afari, who saved him from being killed by vampires. Afari soon learned about Eric and his origins and decided to take him under his wing, becoming his mentor and foster father and helping him to control his powers. Afari taught Eric everything he knew about hunting, fighting, and killing vampires. Determined to avenge his mother's death, Eric fashioned himself into a vampire hunter like Afari while still a teenager and started calling himself Blade, after the sharp weapons with which he used to kill vampires. Finally, Blade and Afari split up when Blade mistook a man suffering from a derangement for a vampire, killing him, and Jamal willingly took the fall for the murder. Somewhere in the 30s, Logan worked as a sailor and encountered the Ancient One, the Sorcerer Supreme, with a young prodigy named Stick when they were trying to retrieve a mystical box. They were being chased by Japanese soldiers, so Logan defended the pair, allowing them to go about their mission. Logan met a captain in the Japanese Imperial Army named Ogun. Impressed by Logan's bravery and defiance, Ogun offered to train him in the martial arts at his dojo in Kanazawa, but Logan declined. Years later, Logan remembered Ogun's offer, and he went to Japan to learn self-discipline. There, Logan spent years under his tutelage and regarded Ogun as a surrogate father. During this training, Ogun taught Logan how to balance his human side and animal side in order to become a great warrior. During one of their meditation sessions, Ogun and Logan were attacked by a group of ninja led by the criminal lord Ugamahana, who wanted reparations from Ogun for wronging him in the past. Ogun was mortally wounded during the fight, but he revealed he had discovered how to beat death by moving his consciousness to a different body. Ogun intended to use this technique on Logan to take over his body, but Logan left before Ogun had a chance. Ogun worked to perfect his technique over the years, becoming an unstoppable warrior obsessed with fighting all over the world. Logan operated as a spy in Madripoor. Later, he fell in love with aspiring actress Celia Stroud. The two moved to Hollywood, but broke up after 6 months. While working on a film set, Celia was contacted by Morgan Le Fay from the future, and the two made a pact. Morgan would control Celia's body, helping her use spells to abduct Logan and siphon all his rage. Celia would obtain immortality to be young and beautiful forever, while Morgan would prevent the modern age of heroes from ever taking place. However, the spells were not strong enough, and Logan broke free and separated Celia and Morgan. Believing Celia to be an innocent victim, Logan withdrew from her life, feeling guilty. Later, Romulus ordered Logan to gain the trust of Russian spy Taras Romanov, find out how much he knew, and if necessary, kill him. While Logan pretended to take spying lessons from Taras, he gave hand-to-hand combat lessons to Taras' ward, Natalia. The legendary Western gunfighter Two-Gun Kid ended up as an elderly man in a New York hospital. He had spent a number of years in the future, witnessing the age of heroes, and he told stories of these adventures to his doctor, Thomas Holloway. The doctor simply dismissed them as pulp magazine fantasies of a very ill man, and rejected the Two-Gun Kid's claims that this age was soon coming, and that Holloway would be a part of it. One night, the Two-Gun Kid died suddenly in his sleep, and left Holloway a gift, his pair of six-shooters and his mask, with a card stating, "From one hero to another." 16 years old Steve Rogers became orphaned after his mother Sarah died of pneumonia. She had been working 2 jobs to support Steve since his father, Joseph, had died 12 years earlier of influenza, or, according to a different account, a heart attack. Despite suffering from asthma, scarlet fever, rheumatic fever, heart palpitations, nervous trouble, bone deformity, scoliosis, high blood pressure, diabetes, anemia, partial deafness, and astigmatism, Steve slept in condemned buildings and worked odd jobs to survive, until his friend Arnie found him a cheap room at a brothel, where Steve quickly befriended the discriminated working girls. Meanwhile, Baron Strucker met Baron Zemo, and they discussed creating a crisis in America so that Americans would feel attracted to Nazi ideals. After publicly opposing Nazi recruitment campaigns, Steve was offered a job by gangster Meyer Lansky. Being Jewish, Lansky was interested in investigating rumors that the Nazis were planning an operation codenamed Garden, but his men looked too much like gangsters to be inconspicuous, so he sent Steve instead. Steve would do research for the rest of the year. Heinrich Kroller influenced his grandson, Baron Karl Mordo, to seek out the Ancient One, hoping to gain his knowledge. The Ancient One realized his need for a successor and agreed to tutor Mordo. Although he recognized Mordo's evil ambitions in his mind, he decided that he could do his best to convert Mordo to the service of good, or, at the very least, keep him in check. The highwaymen came to the Ancient One, and then the aged Genghis, hoping to become immortal. They both rejected his request. The Ancient One determined that 8-year-old Stephen Strange would be his successor. This information was shared with Mordo. Seeking to be the Ancient One's successor himself, Mordo began plaguing Stephen with nightmares wherein he was attacked by demons via a psychic construct. The Ancient One came to Stephen, dispelled the visions of demons, and promised the boy that he would protect Stephen from then on. However, the psychic construct in his mind made it so Stephen was still plagued by nightmares, and he secretly began drinking at a young age to deal with his night terrors. In February 1939, Steve continued spying for Mr. Lansky and discovered Operation Garden was a plot to explode a bomb at a Nazi rally in Madison Square Garden to gain sympathy for the Nazi ideals and pin the blame on Jews and communists, starting a cycle of violence that would have psychologically crippled humanity. Unknown to Steve, the plot was led by Asmodee, the fallen angel. While spying on the proceedings, Steve was surprised when a repentant Nazi pleaded with Steve to warn everyone before being shot to death. Steve escaped gunfire to reach Mr. Lansky and explain the situation to him. Although he was deathly ill, Steve was too stubborn and joined the offensive in Madison Square Garden. Working with Mr. Lansky's gangsters, Steve successfully stopped the massacre as he ran the truck containing the bomb into a lake, acting as an agent of change that could herald an age of positive change. For this, Asmodee considered sniping him to death while Steve recovered in the hospital, but decided not to prevent him from becoming a martyr. Asmodee assumed Steve's illnesses would take him out sooner rather than later. Professor Phineas Horton finished his development of Kang's future technology and created the Human Torch, an android who mimicked virtually all of the functions of a human being, including independent thought, with a single flaw that he burst into flames when exposed to oxygen. Confidentially, Horton was being financed by President Roosevelt, who sent him money through back channels in hopes Horton's invention would counteract the Nazis' Project Nietzsche, which sought to create super soldiers from studying John Steele's body. Horton created the Human Torch alongside Fred Raymond, who had to leave the project after becoming sick from long-time exposure to asbestos. Secretly, he and his wife received payments from Nazi Kenneth Lomer, and leaked information to him about the Horton cells. Horton's other partner was the mutant Dr. Nemesis, whose mutant power made him a super genius. Nemesis grew disgusted by Horton's hope for fame and fortune and dissolved their partnership even as the press was on their way. Phineas attempted a first unveiling of the torch at the New York World Fair, but when the android caught fire, the press ran away. The only person who stuck around was the Nazi Kenneth Lomer, who stole the torch's solar cell and used it to create drones to aid the Nazis. 5 months later, World War II began, an event influenced by the Illuminati outer circle. 2 months after that, Horton made a second attempt at revealing the torch's existence to the public at a press conference. The lighting of the Human Torch dawned in the golden age of heroes, despite the press reacting with panic and thinking the torch must be destroyed. The Scientists Guild was present, and they ordered Phineas to destroy the torch. The public outcry led to a presidential order, and so Horton buried the android in an airtight tube within cement until such time as he could find a way to either prevent the android from bursting into flame or learn how to control its flame. There was a slow leak in the tube, however, and eventually enough oxygen entered so that the android's flame ignited explosively, permitting him to escape. The torch wandered the streets, panicking passerbys. Dr. Holloway was out in the streets and instinctively came to the rescue of those who were endangered by the torch's flames. After the torch left, Holloway once more looked at the two-gun kid's old guns and mask and realized the old man had been telling the truth. Holloway then developed the identity of the Angel and became one of the first crime-fighting vigilantes. He also began chronicling this point in history in a diary he dubbed the Marvels Project. In his infancy, the Human Torch was duped by a crook named Anthony Sardo into committing crimes. Realizing what he was doing was wrong, the Torch confronted Sardo and fought against him. During the fight, the Torch was doused in nitrogen, which proved to be the catalyst that allowed him to control his flame from that point on. In attempting to bring Sardo to justice, the criminal was killed in battle. When Horton suggested that the two use his powers to obtain fame and fortune, the Torch rejected this idea, leaving Horton's home a flaming inferno. Later, Professor Horton himself was accepted as a member of the Scientists Guild. Afterwards, the Torch adopted the civilian persona of Jim Hammond and decided to take up a job as a New York police officer. Stephen Strange was a child full of wonder, developing an interest in magic by age 9. However, the wonderment of childhood was quickly quashed by Stephen's father, Eugene, who was a no-nonsense businessman who often chastised his children for pursuing activities that he considered a waste of time, such as birthday celebrations. One day, Stephen tried to show off the ribbon he won in a spelling bee and was punished by his father. Seeking Eugene's approval, Stephen decided to become just like his father, dismissing anything other than the pursuit of money as a trivial waste of time. In 1939, Union Jack put together a team of kung fu commandos to take down Hitler's secret death squad of SS ninjas led by the notorious butcher Her Samurai. However, Fat Cobra was the only survivor. With the Nazis' rise to power, Atlantean spies reported the information back to King Ghidorah, who alerted Namor of a missile-testing site hidden on an island in the Pacific. The Nazis were developing V-weapons and testing them on Atlantis' reefs for target practice. Namor lured a Kraken to flood the Nazi base, forcing them to relocate the V program and delaying its deployment in combat by 5 years. Namor was helped in the operation by an American airplane pilot, who helped him start to rethink his views on surface dwellers. After confirming the existence of the submariner, the Nazis began searching for members of the Atlantean race to capture and experiment on. Namor came across such a Nazi harvesting boat in the Sargasso Sea. Furious at the wholesale slaughter of his people, the submariner destroyed the boat and killed all men on board. Shortly after this, a pair of divers intruded on Namor while he explored a derelict ship, prompting Namor to slay them. Seeing that the human race was once more encroaching on their domain, Emperor Thakor and Princess Fen sent Namor and his cousin Lady Dorma to attack the surface dwellers in an act of war. After attacking the Cape Anna lighthouse, Namor swam to New York City. Namor's mission became distracted when he got sucked into a sewage pipe and trashed a nearby power plant. Chased by the authorities, he attempted to get the audience of a wealthy woman, Mrs. Drayson, who accidentally lit herself on fire with her own cigarette. Following the girl as she was being taken to the hospital, Namor captured her to use in his crusade against Americans. Clashing with the authorities along the harbor, Namor killed several police officers but lost Mrs. Drayson and fled back into the ocean empty-handed. Noticing that Namor was interested in a woman, the police sent Officer Betty Dean to lead Namor into a trap by pretending to be in peril in the harbor. Sure enough, Namor came to her rescue. When she attempted to arrest him, Namor pulled her out to sea. There, they witnessed 2 Nazi U-boats attacking a British cargo ship. The submariner decided to help the British vessel and destroyed the subs. Returning to Betty, she pleaded to Namor to continue to help the Allies' cause. For now, Namor insisted on not choosing sides, but agreed to destroy anyone trying to interfere with the transportation of food or medical supplies. In December, the Human Torch stopped a frog mutant that escaped from the Super Soldier Project, saving a woman named Eleanor. The frog's saliva began eating the Torch's artificial flesh, ruining a social outing with Warren Worthington and Howard Stark. While Professor Horton grew Jim a second skin, he continued operating as a superhero with his mechanic interiors exposed, causing a panic among the population. The Torch fell into depression, but Eleanor showed up at his place and cheered him up, reminding him that people are not monsters because others say so, even if they're machines or black. Motivated, Torch rescued Warren Worthington when his airship had a malfunction at New Year's Eve. After that, Eleanor became the Torch's first girlfriend. In 1940, after a number of assignments, the Human Torch became lonely, sought out Professor Horton, and asked for his advice. Horton told him of Fred Raymond, one of his collaborators in building the Torch, and his wife, Nora. Both were terminally ill from exposure to asbestos and raising their son Thomas, whom they nicknamed Porro in memory of their Mexican honeymoon. When visiting the Raymond home to learn what Horton was alluding to, the Torch found the Raymonds being terrorized by the criminal known as Asbestos Lady. The Torch fought her and her minions off. Noticing that Porro had slept through the entire battle, the Raymonds told him how their son was apparently immune to fire. Although they didn't know it, this was because Porro had a recessive inhuman gene. The Torch left, vowing to keep a secret eye on them in case Asbestos Lady threatened them again. Stunt flyers Nick Fury and Red Hargrove were putting on a show in England. During a tour, they were hired to train infantrymen how to parachute out of a plane to ready them for combat. There, they met Lieutenant Sam Sawyer. Impressed with their parachuting skills, Sawyer convinced them to help in the war effort by flying him into Holland to recover plans stolen from the Nazis. While trying to track down the secret files, they crossed paths with Timothy Dum Dum Duggan, a Chicago native who was the strong man in a traveling circus. Later, they located their agent in Holland and recovered the plans, escaping back to Britain. Although Fury and Duggan scrapped with each other, they quickly became fast friends. Sawyer was so impressed with Fury and Hargrove, he suggested them to upper command to use in a series of top-secret missions that required plausible deniability. Fury and Hargrove were tasked to extract a Nazi scientist seeking to defect to the United States. Abraham Erskine, one of the scientists developing Project Nietzsche, in February. Erskine was being relocated to Holland, but Fury and Red parachuted near the convoy transporting Erskine and liberated him from it, a successful mission that would change the direction of the war. In summer, Namor became convinced that he should help the human race. Upon returning to New York City, he was arrested for his past crimes, found guilty and sentenced to death. Namor was put on the electric chair, but the electrical jolt revitalized him and allowed him to break free, vowing to renew his aggression toward the surface world. Namor attacked New York City as the first part of his conquest of the surface world, taking the Statue of Liberty as his hideout. Demanding that the mayor of the city resign, the mayor refused, and so Namor began going on a path of destruction across the city. After wrecking the Empire State Building, Namor was warned by Betty Dean that if he did not cease his hostilities, the authorities were going to send the Human Torch against him. Balking at this, Namor continued his path of destruction, which ultimately led to his first clash with the Torch. Their fight took them across the city, wrecking Coney Island. Namor Outmatched, dove into the water vowing to get revenge. Renewing his hostilities toward the Torch, Namor almost trapped the Torch underwater, but the flaming hero escaped. Namor then forced his way into a local TV station and demanded that the Human Torch cease attacking him. The Torch caught up and they continued their battle across the city. The submariner tried to revitalize his strength by diving into a reservoir of water, but it turned out to be chlorinated and he just weakened himself. Although blasted out of the water by the military, Namor managed to escape and track the Human Torch to the Tropy chemical plant. There, the fight reached a stalemate, until Betty managed to convince both Namor and the Torch to stand down and part company if Namor promised to cease his hostilities. British officer Lieutenant John Watkins was reported killed during the retreat at Dunkirk in 1940. In fact, he survived, but his superiors saw the opportunity to send him undercover into the occupied countries and help rally local resistance against the Nazis. Operating under the eyes of the Nazi secret police, he adopted the identity of Citizen V while fighting his secret war, leaving a V sign wherever he struck as a way of giving the resistance a symbol. He worked with the assistance of a group of freedom fighters dubbed the V Battalion. Meanwhile, private investigator the Ferret was approached by the Three X's, the latest incarnation of the Scientist Guild who created the Eternity Mask, which was now in the Ferret's possession. They told the Ferret that they believed once the Allies won the war in Europe, a new generation of X-humans would rise to shape the future, and to bring about their existence, they needed the Eternity Mask. The Ferret thought the Three X's only needed it to fight the Nazis and agreed to give it to them. That summer, the Ferret was hired by a woman to search for her missing mother, who was the cleaning lady for a Nazi spy who had killed her to protect his secret. While tracking her down, the Ferret came across the Nazi just as he was giving fellow spy Heinz Kruger orders to assassinate Abraham Erskine, who was developing the Super Soldier Project. While attempting to trail Kruger, the Ferret was caught by a Nazi spy and fatally stabbed to death. As for Dr. Erskine, he shared the location of Project Nietzsche with the army, who sent Fury and Red to bomb the place. As a result, John Steele was freed from the confinement he had been in since World War I, and he was able to join the Allies' efforts. In September, Namor prevented a Nazi U-boat from attacking the New York harbor, but he let it get away because they were human like him. When Betty Dean gave him a hard time for it, Namor got fed up and decided not to get involved in the war anymore. Drinking in a bar, he was approached by a Nazi woman who attempted to bring him into their cause by explaining he fulfills their Superman ideal and that all other races are subhuman. This convinced Namor to finally destroy the U-boat, but this wasn't Namor's triumphant entry into the Allies. The dead Germans were evil, but still living beings, so Namor mourned them. One day in the fall, Steve Rogers was horrified by newsreels about the Nazis' invasion of Europe and became determined to join the army in order to do his part to protect America from the potential Nazi threat. In November, Steve's friend Sam Fogler convinced Steve to travel to Los Angeles in order to find his brother who had moved out west and joined a life of crime. Sam found his brother Harold and attempted to convince him to leave his gang. They were caught by the members of Harold's gang, who were Nazis. After Steve called the gang Nazi scum and hateful monsters, the leader didn't shoot him as he was a weakling, but instead killed the strong one, Sam. After the FBI apprehended the Nazis, Steve was told that his actions from that night were proof he had the heart to fight in the war and was encouraged to enlist in the army despite his frailty, as there were rumors they were working on something that needed more heart than muscle. A week later, Steve volunteered to join the United States military, but due to his frail body, he was rejected under Class 4F, making him ineligible to become a soldier. As he walked out, Steve bumped into a group of Nazi spies who were attempting to steal the super soldier formula, which had been written in spider silk in an amulet to hide it. After grabbing the amulet and successfully evading the Nazis, Steve attracted the attention of General Chester Phillips, who offered him an opportunity to help, in the form of Project Rebirth, a secret military project to create a breed of super soldiers. Before Steve, there had been a failed prototype, Clint McIntyre, an Army private who had killed his commanding officer. Some rogue scientists believed him to be a better subject than Steve, but they gave him the ingredients in the wrong order, resulting in his death. Dominic Fortune was also a candidate for the project, but he was turned down due to his questionable lifestyle. Following his acceptance into the project, Steve met with the creator of the experiment, Abraham Erskine. Steve then underwent initial tests and met project member Cynthia Glass, who was, unknown to him, a Nazi spy. Despite this, she became Steve's first crush. When Nazis attempted to attack the secret base, Steve was protected by Dominic Fortune. Scientist Markham Eriksson pierced the spatial, dimensional barriers and came into contact with Vision, a keeper of law from Smoke World who had captured a criminal who had committed the first murder on Smoke World in centuries. The Vision, assisted by the Lawgiver, was looking for a suitable place of banishment for the murderer. Eriksson asked the Vision to come to Earth to act as a superpowered guardian over humanity. His first attempt to come to Earth resulted in him going to Jupiter, where he left the murderer. The incident inspired him to devote himself to fighting crime. In November, the Vision was brought to Earth once again by Enoch Mason's Dimensional Smasher device. When mobster Brains Borelli sought to eliminate Mason and his daughter Sheila for their inability to pay back the loan that Enoch got to fund his experiments, the Vision came to their aid. After the Vision turned Borelli over to the authorities, he became an ally to the Masons. The Vision fought crime in the area and adopted a human guise of Mr. Arcus, remaining close with the Masons. In the winter of 1940, the final preparations were made and Steve Rogers underwent the final test. As he walked into the room, he noticed a strange door labeled Project Thunderer, but was told to dismiss it as a path not taken. Inside that door, the three X's used the Eternity Mask and a tome of arcane magic to turn radio operator Jerry Carstairs into a superhero known as the Thunderer. He fought Nazis under the names Thunderer, Black Avenger, and Dark Avenger. As for Steve, he was injected and made to ingest Erskine's formula and then was bathed in Vita-rays, which caused his body to transform into the peak of human perfection. By this time, the project was infiltrated by Nazi agent Heinz Kruger, who fatally shot Erskine. Enraged, the newly empowered Steve killed Kruger to avenge the good doctor. Without any complete copies of the super soldier formula available in writing, Steve Rogers was the only man to receive the complete treatment at the time. Steve began a battery of training to hone his fighting skills and military strategy. In 1941, the Army wanted Steve to remain in hiding until they could determine the identity of the Nazi spy who killed Professor Erskine, so he was sent undercover, posting as a bumbling private at Camp Lehigh, where he was to remain in hiding until further notice. After discovering smugglers on the base, he stopped them with a makeshift disguise, attracting the Army's Director of Information's attention, who saw great potential in Steve as a propaganda icon. General Phillips located a journal belonging to Steve's ancestor, who lived during the American Revolution. This ancestor was a hero who wore an American-themed costume and operated under the name Captain America, so the military decided to model Steve after his ancestor's other identity. By March of 1941, Steve learned of his polar opposite, the Nazi Red Skull. It was shortly after this that Steve was given his American flag-themed uniform.